Okay, so this is the April 19th meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee to the Board of Regents. Thank you, everyone, for being flexible and rescheduling this meeting. And I did circulate a draft of an agenda ahead of time. I think I can share this screen. And I guess the first item would be approval of the agenda and minutes. Now, we do have one, I did get one email just before the meeting that Sarah's attendance should be added to the minutes. So that would be, I don't know if someone needs to make a motion for that update to the minutes, but that was all I had on updating the minutes. So does anyone have any amendments or discussion on approval of the minutes? Do we need a motion to approve those or?
Actually, I just saw something. I'm apparently listed as being both present and absent at the same meeting.
Oh, okay. So we need to make that adjustment too. All right, we'll make sure we.
That's impressive.
I'm coming and going. I was present.
Okay. All right, so we'll fix that and Sarah's attendance. Any other updates to the minutes? All right, so is there a motion to approve them?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mark. Second was that James? Okay. And do we need to vote on that? I can never remember. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any abstentions? Any against? Okay, so it looks like the minutes are approved unanimously and as amended. Thank you. Approved as amended. And the next would be the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for approving the agenda?
Yeah.
All right, Mark Jackson. Thanks, Mark. Second by Kalina. Discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so it looks like the agenda is approved. Lois raised her hand, so Lois, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Lois, was there something you wanted to, or was that a vote?
No, that I didn't. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, no worries. Okay. All right. So our first agenda item is the report of the chair and vice chair. I thought I would kind of just take a minute to share some thoughts about higher education policy in Connecticut as part of my report. So I have just a few slides with some observations, particularly relating to higher education funding. And then I'll have a few items that have sort of developed in the interim since our prior meeting. So I'm going to just share my screen one more time here. So as I said, this is just a sort of brief report to the FAC, in particular relating to higher education policy in Connecticut and a couple of initiatives and sort of positions that have been staked out relating to higher education policy. So I kind of want to just talk a little bit about potentially some incoherence in some things that people have been trying to do, as I said, in this legislative session. And I have a track here and a cartoon figure of a student, and of course, Student needs to make progress towards life after life goals after attending our institutions. Part of that might be a degree of some sort, which I'm sort of portraying as a hurdle, and then potentially some kind of licensing in certain fields, right, for educators and healthcare professionals and that sort of thing. Now, at the start of this year, the governor announced an initiative to potentially improve that picture, to improve or lower at least one of those hurdles. He had a proposal that he announced to eliminate licensure application fees for certain professions. So if we go back to that image, right, the idea here is to lower that second barrier, right, and maybe even eliminate it entirely, so people can pursue some important professions in the state of Connecticut. But I want to talk about sort of the idea that that first barrier is still a potential block to getting into those professions, right? The degrees that students can earn through CT State and the CSUs. And that's what I'm a little bit concerned with in terms of coherence of policy. So there's a CT Mirror report in which the OPM Deputy Secretary said the college units have a variety of levers at their disposal in order to fund what happens on our campuses. And I will have to admit that I think this is the first time I've ever heard of a campus being referred to as a unit, but anyway, that was maybe that's OPM speak for our communities. So let's just be clear about what Padamianos is saying here. The lever he's talking about is charging students more. He made allusions to, grant funding, and it's certainly true that there are other sources of funding, but certainly for the CSUs, the only other major source of funding would be tuition. So if what he's proposing is that, tuition should be increased, right, to for our students in order to, fund the commitments we make and the opportunities we offer, then what he's proposing is to actually raise that first barrier, right, the hurdle of earning that degree. And so it seems really odd to me that anyone would propose raising the degree barrier while the governor is trying to lower the licensing barrier, right? It seems like that completely invalidates what the priorities of the governor's office. I could be wrong, but just in terms of the sense that we, students have to chain these things together in order to fulfill the needs of the state of Connecticut in certain fields, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to raise the degree barrier while lowering the license barrier. So as I was thinking about these things, it looks like OPM is advocating for raising educational financial barriers, and also, to be clear, our students already face some of the highest barriers to attaining post-secondary education in the state. This is really horrible timing for a proposal like this. FAFSA right now is, I'm describing it as chaos, but I think others have as well. The process by which graduating students or soon to be graduating students apply for financial aid is just kind of all over the place, creating a lot of uncertainty. And so, the idea that we would be raising a barrier at the same time it's harder for people to figure out what the barrier is in the first place just doesn't seem like a great idea to me. And if I'm right, I guess one question I would have is, why is OPM trying to negate the governor's policy of reducing licensing barriers to careers? So, I'm just kind of advocating for some coherence in policy here. Otherwise, what we're talking about is sort of a performative change in that licensing policy, right? Like essentially on paper, we're making it easier for people to enter these professions, but at the very end stage of all the training and learning they need to do, but it would make a whole lot more sense, and it would be a lot more effective policy if all barriers were kind of reduced. So that was just a perspective I wanted to share with everybody, and kind of turning to some other items that we've discussed a little bit in email, and also probably you've discussed with possibly with colleagues on campus. There are two consulting efforts at work on our campuses. The first is run by an organization called NCHEMS. They were hired by OPM, and they plan to deliver a report on CSCU sometime in October. We should see a draft of that report, and at least on this university campuses, stakeholders have met with representatives of NCHEMS on all 4 campuses, and I've communicated with a few people who have been in those meetings, and I was in the Eastern meeting. So I may have some inkling for where this is headed. And then we're going to have a second consulting effort on our campuses, this one engaged by our system office. It's an organization located in Connecticut called Social Venture Capital, SVC, I think. I guess they have already done a report on early childhood education, I want to say, in our state. But it remains to be seen. I don't think anyone, at least at the universities, has engaged directly with them as of yet. And that may be a typo. It may be SVP, Social Venture Partners.
Yeah.
Thank you. Social Venture Partners. Thanks. So, okay. Second update, we have talked about the fact that there's a new technology committee, and there seemed to be some sentiment that FAC would like a representative on that committee. Kalina and I engaged with the system office on this matter and received an update in the past day or two that this will be a formal proposal made to the Board of Regents for adoption, that the FAC would have a representative on the tech committee. So we need to sort of begin to consider candidates for who might serve on that body, and kind of share information with us and send information to the committee from us. So take a look. I think they've had 2 meetings, I want to say, maybe, and there's one coming up, but do take a minute, if possible, to look at the sort of minutes and agendas of those meetings, and think about if you know a colleague who might, have a sort of an educational perspective on technology. I think that would be really important. And then the third update I have is on automatic textbook billing. There was a sort of extensive and detailed and thorough discussion of this topic at a BOR meeting, not the last one, but the one before that. The regents took a pass on implementing automatic textbook billing for this year, with the exception of Charter Oak. So Charter Oak, it looks like, will be implementing automatic textbook billing for the upcoming year. But for the CSUs, this is on hold. And I reached out to the FAC representatives for the CSUs and asked them to see if there's any interest in a cooperative model for stores. So we're gathering information about that, so we can maybe have some recommendations for alternatives if this issue kind of cycles back again. And I think I saw Kalina has a hand. That's actually all I had for my report. So I'll stop sharing. And Kalina, did you have something?
Yeah, I think Mark had a hand up before me though.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that
Yeah.
one. Mark?
I just had a quick question about the FAC rep for the tech committee. So is that going to be a member of the FAC on that, or is it open to any faculty member?
So I think the answer to that question is going to depend upon sort of where the system office lands in its proposal to the BOR. There was some discussion of the fact that it was only it's only been the case that faculty members who are ex officio on the BOR itself um, have served on the subcommittees, that is the chair and vice chair. My opinion is that, you know, I'd like to see someone who you know, really would be interested in engaging on this to sit on the committee and kind of leave it open. But I don't actually have those details from the system office at this point, what they're going to propose. So I'll try to get those as soon as I can, and maybe get a draft of the proposal in order to answer that, Mark.
Okay.
All right. So, Kalina?
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was going forward, the textbook thing was going forward at Charter Oak. And, you know, the existence of the resolution in the first place suggested that maybe we needed the board's authorization, but perhaps it was just the authorization for the group so that they can negotiate on behalf of all, right? So does anybody have any information about like what the actual cost will be for students at Charter Oak, given that it's not negotiated in that way, or how it's moving? Does anyone have any details? Yeah, Linda.
I had to get all the buttons. I don't have a lot of information in front of me, but my memory is that whatever happened, the negotiation with Barnes and Noble, we were able to get that same rate that they were offering as a group. So not only is this really is good for our students, but it's nice that we can do it at that rate too. That's about all I recall off the top of my head.
Okay, nice, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So David had his hand up. Go ahead, David.
Thanks. I'm not sure if I should make the statement now or after Kalina has presented her report as vice chair. But Brendan, as you mentioned, the last and perhaps the second to last board meetings, there is a matter arising from that, which I would like to discuss. So I'm not sure if it's best to do it right now or to do it after Kalina's presentation. I ask your opinion.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brendan.
No, go ahead, Kalina. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you can go ahead. You know, I'll just say by way of like introduction to that what you're gonna talk about is, you know, something that took place at the Board of Regents meeting that was highly unusual. And the way that the textbook decision went down was also very unusual. It was something that the two of us in the time that we've been at FAC have not seen before. And it was interesting to see that level of reconsideration or action at the board. So just to say that, like the textbook thing, if you didn't see it, is worth just things are slightly different now, it seems. But yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I really do have a few matters that I wish to draw to your attention. As I said, it's a matter arising from the previous to last Board of Regents meeting, when from the public comment period, I proposed a resolution for adoption by the board. Kalina has mentioned that some unusual things happened at that meeting. I think the fact that the board actually rejected the proposed textbook policy was really significant. That's the first time I've ever seen that happen. But the other thing which happened, which I want to draw your attention to, was the fact that a resolution which I proposed and asked a member of the board if they would entertain it, was in fact unanimously approved. And let me read to you that resolution. That the Board of Regents recommends to university presidents that on an institution by institution basis, priority be given to refilling positions in departments where more than 25% of faculty retire, and that a report by each university be provided to the board by January 1st, 2025. This is, I want to explain why I did that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the consequences that have fallen upon me as a result. I can actually share it. I'm not sure if that's something that you want to do, but I think you can see here in the box. And I had learned, it's right there, that whole statement. And what I had learned from 4 years as an ex officio member of the board was that any proposal to the board has to be rather direct, printed, and no more than 1 page. And this is what I did. It was, if you look at it carefully, a recommendation, not an instruction, from the board to its presidents, not having anything to do with any union, in particular the AUP. And it was to request that they accord priority to departments where more than 25% of faculty have retired as a consequence of retirements, and perhaps with respect to the December 18th resolution of the board. And I added an item that a report be made by January 1st, 2025. Let me say what this was not. This was not based on negotiation with anyone, and in particular, members of the board. I did not claim to represent the union, and I do not represent the union. I did it as a member of the public, admittedly someone who has spent 4 years at the Board of Regents, who had attended every meeting of the board for 4 years, every meeting of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee for 4 years, and at my university, every meeting of the Steering Committee and of the Senate in order to make reports. Let me give just a little bit of background to it. At the December meeting, 14th meeting, that some of you may recall, the board increased student tuition by 5% across the board. I had attended the previous Finance Committee meeting where this resolution had been presented, and had at that time asked how much money would be raised by it. And the response from Lloyd Blanchard was $20 million. And I at that point said, I think that that was unfair and unreasonable to ask of the students, especially given all of the circumstances in which they find themselves. So that for the meeting of the board on the 14th, I came prepared with a little resolution. And the resolution simply said the following. Let me see if I can actually find it. Yes, you may be seeing it. You can see it. I'll read it. That based on the figure of an expected $20 million additional revenue from an average of 5% across the board tuition general fee increase, that on a one-time basis only and solely for FY25, an additional $10 million be made available from the CT State Reserve and $10 million from the CSU System Office Reserve to offset the proposed tuition fee, general fee increases for college and university students, respectively. As a result, the 5% increase should be rescinded. And then I said, board members, what say you? Should students pay for the deficits accumulated due in large part to Students First? In which case we should rename the plan as Students Pay. Or should this board take full responsibility for the errors of commission and omission of the immediate past and avoid having students pay through a judicious one-time use of part of the reserves? I welcome anyone who would move, for purposes of discussion and eventual vote, the above proposal as an amendment to the resolution before you. I was disappointed. Nobody, not even the 2 students who were there, voting members of the board, picked up on that proposal. And I learned sort of a lesson. I repeated it again. I said, would somebody simply move this so you have a discussion? There was no action, although as I recall, I got some applause from the public gallery, including the president and the secretary of the AUP union, as I noticed. So come the December 18th meeting, I was a little disappointed by the fact that the proposal for the retirement initiative, and let's be clear on this, it wasn't a retirement incentive. Nobody is, I have no case, and certainly others know of no case as well, although there may be exceptionally, of anybody who's retiring as a result of the 30,000 or 1% bonus, I think that's the best term for it, who did not already plan to retire before. And I'm in that category. Whether I get that bonus or not, I plan to retire at the end of this term. This will be one of the last times that I can address this body as a full-time faculty member. At that time, I read to the board an email which had been sent to everybody at my university from the president of AUP, concerned, as was I, that there had been a lack of communication and consultation before the presentation of that resolution. And I said, and it's in the minutes, really, a special effort has to be made to contact the unions, to communicate and to consult with them. If not, we're going to have serious problems. And I also said, or indicated, I was disappointed that the resolution had not been previously presented to the Finance Committee. Let's fast forward then to the March 21st meeting. On March 4th, the AUP had communicated to all faculty, certainly at CCSU, and I think at the other universities, that they had ceased their negotiation, such as it was, with, they thought the board, but in fact it was with the labor attorney at the system office. And at that time, I began to think, I can draw on my experience of what works and what doesn't in presenting a proposal to the board. And so what I did was I wrote up a one-page document, which I just showed you previously, signed by myself and two other members of the CCSU faculty, Professor Ostad, a former chair of the psychology department, a former president of AUP at CCSU, a former vice president of the CSU AUP, the co-coordinator with me of the Peace Studies program, and the director of one of the labs on campus for biofeedback. It also included Professor Evelyn Phillips, who was a longtime member of the Black Caucus at CCSU, who was previously chair of the anthropology department, who was co-founder and co-director of the John Lewis Center for Social Justice. The three of us, by coincidence, had a total of 100 years of service. And so I titled the document, A Proposal from Faculty with 100 Years of Service. The idea was to have a recommendation for priorities to what everybody agreed would be a difficult situation, where as a result of retirements, whether with a bonus or without a bonus, more than 25% of faculty in a department retired. It was also an effort to have some transparency and review of what would happen. So consequently, I included the January 1st report from university presidents to the board. I'm going to stop there for a second and ask if anybody has questions, either as to my intent or as to the actual statements.
David, I'm just gonna, we do have the FAC approved an agenda, and I'm struggling to see this item in the agenda.
That's correct. It's a matter of personal privilege, if you please.
Right. So I've received a number of emails from FAC members who indicated that they have a hard out at a time limit on how much time they can spend at this meeting, and we do have one item that might require quorum for a vote. So I would also just ask that you try to limit this to a reasonable amount of time, since it is not an agenda item that the FAC adopted. So that's all I would remark as chair.
I can reserve the rest of my opinions for after the matters that require your quorum, so long as you come back and ask me to complete it.
I mean, you had asked for questions from committee members, so I'm not trying to interrupt that. If people have questions now, let's do that now. But yeah, if we could also make sure that Kalina has a chance to present her report to as many members as possible, that would be great. So,
Well, let's defer the questions and my final comments until after all the business that is required of this committee.
okay, thank you, David. Kalina, did you want to go ahead with your report?
Sure. And my report is rather condensed because I feel like perhaps we might want to invite some folks to present various reports that have been prepared for the system. In particular, so I know you've already mentioned, Brendan, NCHEMS and SVP. But in addition to that, there's the Farilli report, the report from Lori Lamb, and a report on the cost of consolidation, all shared with the committee. And certainly if folks have read it and want to discuss a little bit of that content today, that's great. And I hope that you do that. But I do think that if you take those three things alone together, what you find is an account of, so the consolidation was this attempt to do two things, merge the campuses and create this new efficient shared services model, right? And the report, the Farilli report, well, the Lori Lamb report, documents in a way that is refreshingly, it actually reflects our experience, right? Just how catastrophically bad that design was. The Farilli report documents how poorly designed the Consolidated College itself was. And then the report on the cost of consolidation suggests just how much of an investment of public dollars we put into a disastrously designed thing. The thing is, the content of those reports could have been sourced from any one of our comments. You could read FAC reports. You can have talked to almost any member of faculty. You could have listened in on the difficult conversations that were had in the consolidation committees, where people were invited to resign when they highlighted some of these very same issues. So it is unfortunate that yet more money had to be spent to simply document what we have already many times described to management. They charged ahead anyway, and nobody stopped them. And I think that's it. But it would be, I think, nice to have Lori Lamb here, and I failed to invite her in time to perhaps have someone talk about Farilli and the and also the cost of consolidation document, because I think there are numerous ways to estimate the cost of the consolidation. This is just one of many, but worthy of a conversation, because we are advocating pretty strenuously for a big investment this year. And I think that there is no appropriate stance where we can say that our system does not require investment, because we have a responsibility to the state, and to a whole generation of people who don't have the degrees that we have yet, right? And yet at the same time, there's a real fear that the mistakes that have been that have happened in the past could just be repeated again, and the students once again don't benefit from this investment. So that it's worthy of a conversation. I think also leading into that, the talk about funding, I think most of you have probably seen the recent news articles that have, the Speaker of the House very clearly saying that the commitment to higher ed, public higher ed, is there that is so encouraging. It's so different from where we've been in previous years. I think it's a testament to the amount of work that we've done. And I'm just really grateful to see that commitment coming from, legislative leadership. That also is new. So like, David, we put some years in and it was thankless, but things are starting to turn a corner, at least in some ways, right? And that's hopeful. I should have the bill number in front of me. I will put it in the chat shortly, but take note of the fact that in addition to this effort to find funding for at least higher ed and some nonprofits from the legislature now, there is also a bill that proposes to create a committee, a legislative committee to study the finances of public higher ed in general. And that is something that's being sort of shaped up right now. I think the intention is for it to be like a 2-year study with a report out in fiscal year 2027. And I think that that is probably going to be a really important thing to make sure that the funding that we get is directed in the right ways with the right priorities. So yeah, I hope that in addition to the finances, there will also be some consideration taken of the sort of structural deficits of the system itself, right? I think beyond shared services, beyond consolidation, if you think of the way that the Board of Regents is structured without any, prejudice towards any individual board member, 9 of the 15 are appointed by the governor with no restriction on who they are and what their focus must be. There is no direct responsibility to any constituency in the state for the vast majority of the board. That gives one individual, no matter who that individual is, way too much influence over the state of public higher ed in the entire state. And I think that's something that should be reflected upon. And we need to think about how to constitute that structure in a way that people are really held to account for representing the people that the system serves. And that is certainly not the way that it works right now. So I hope that there is some attention to that sort of thing and some consideration of how to fix it. I will also just comment that I'm a little disappointed. I continue to be disappointed by the amount of money that our system leadership is asking for the system. When you consider the size of the deficit and the amount that they say they can make do with, and the consequences that they have documented as of the November 15th meeting, those are disastrous. Those are catastrophic. I feel like at CT State, if you're going to do that to us, just shut us down now. Like, don't make it painful. Just shut it down. Like, you either want a college or you don't, right? So to accommodate those sorts of cuts and to services, and then say that you're leading a system for the people, to me is just, it's unconscionable. To my knowledge, they have not increased the ask. But I know that our unions have been very, very clear about the fact that that ask is not enough, and have been asking for the full deficit plus a rollback to the tuition. And I hope that the commitment that we're hearing from legislative leadership indicates that we have been effective. So that's it for me.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so I also do want to encourage folks, because I don't think we have it anywhere else in the agenda. If you have read those reports and there is something that you want to make some comment on or discuss at the moment, that we just have a minute or two for that now.
I think that's a very good idea, Kalina. And one thing I didn't mention when it comes to NCHEMS is that they claim nobody has ever done an analysis of sort of how to optimally structure a system like ours. And so they're supposedly going to do some kind of review of different methods for structuring a system office and being a system of public higher education. But the implication there is that this system was created in the absence of any understanding of how to best do it. And so I think a lot of the fallout that we're living with is a result of that. And I don't know if their review is going to be helpful at all in talking about sort of reform of the system. But at least someone is trying to answer the question, has anyone figured out how to have a public higher education system that is sort of effective? So Andre has a hand.
Mhm. Go ahead, Andre. I'll say the Ferrilli report just asserts that the design seemed to have been led by political and economic factors and not by an understanding of of any kind of higher ed institution, right? With the absence, yeah. But go ahead, Andre. If you're talking, Andre, we're not hearing you.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the problem is that the people that were doing this, hell, they didn't have a clue as to what the system was. I mean, any kind of restructuring like that requires deep, deep knowledge of the thing you're changing. And these people didn't have it. I mean, for one thing, taking all the programs across the whole thing and putting them, combining them, that's an incredibly difficult job. It's tons of details. I mean, I don't know if any of these folks who were doing this had ever done any curriculum development work, because it seems to me like they had no clue. And I mean, just beyond that, in terms of administration and other things that should be centralized, things that shouldn't be centralized, there's a general approach, there's a general theory as to how to do stuff like that. And these people seem to be totally and utterly and completely ignorant of all of it. This is the stupidest thing, the most ridiculous. I mean, I'm sorry. I worked as a management consultant. I did stuff like that. I've seen it done. I know how difficult it is. I know how many parts there are to these things. And these idiots really had no clue as to what the hell they were doing. So this is like, to me, this is negligence, I mean, on a criminal level, really. Thank you. Thank you for letting me vent.
Thanks, Andre. David, you had your hand?
Yeah, just quickly, I would refer everybody again to our 2023 report to the legislative committees concerned with higher education, where in the final section, we make a number of proposals for a kind of framework for restructuring the whole system based on what is usually referred to as the system of systems approach. That is to say, rather than focusing on the center as a control as a command and control center from the system office, rather we look and we build up from the 6 constituent institutions, the 4 universities, and the 2 colleges. And that would be contrary to the so-called systemness proposal, which the chancellor has on a number of occasions made. That's one thing that I would recommend. And secondly, we also talk about the respecting the distinct missions of the colleges and universities. And in that report, there's an indication of the importance of either formally or functionally separating those 2 functions from the board, which has shown itself to have great difficulty in doing both at the same time. It's certainly a criticism of the Ojakian administration and the board that existed at that time, which is actually substantially changed now, as witnessed by the March 21st meeting, which actually turned down a report and a proposal from the system office. That was probably the first time that has ever happened. That the distinct missions of the colleges and universities be respected, that the autonomy and integrity of the constituent institutions be respected, and that faculty control over curriculum and its modes of delivery be respected. So I think that there is a kind of a framework that we propose in that 2023 report, and it's worth going back and looking at it. I mean, obviously that has to be filled out with a lot more considerations, but perhaps it's a beginning. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Kat, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of wanted to piggyback on what Kalena was saying about there was a part of me that felt validated by the Ferrilli report, And then there was a part of me that was absolutely disgusted by the fact that we have been saying all of these things since May of 2020 at this point. And no one has been listening to us, particularly from the advising perspective. The enrollment process has been nothing short of a disaster. It sends students in circles. It is completely inefficient. We as advisors on the day-to-day are expected to meet with any student who walks through our doors. I'm in the Manchester campus. We need to be able to advise on well over 200 programs now, and there is no program mapping or suggested course sequence for anything. So our catalog and the course descriptions does not say whether a course is only offered in fall or spring. And as such, we have students who are graduating later because if they meet with us, I have no way to know whether underwater basket weaving 375 is only offered in the fall, only offered in the spring, which is obviously going to set students back. DegreeWorks doesn't have prerequisites listed, which is great. It doesn't have academic standing listed, which again, all of these pieces that are missing. And we have students who are coming in who, hey, I'm going to meet with my advisor. I'm going to pick out my classes today. And you have no math or English placement because that has been a giant gap in system office. And they have finally admitted to us that nobody wants to own testing and assessment. So it's just kind of floating in the ether and sending these students in circles, and the prospective students and the new students and their families coming and get it, and they see the mess that it is, and it is embarrassing to say the least. So to see the report, again, validating in one aspect and infuriating in the other, that we've been beating this drum over and over again, and very few people have been listening. So thank you.
Lena, you had your hand up there. Thank you,
Yeah,
Kat.
so, yeah, thank you. And it's, yes, I feel like most of us feel that way, right? It's like, yeah, obviously. And I mean, you talk about May 2020. You can look at an FAC report. This precedes David and I, me and David as chairs of this committee, from, I believe it's December of 2017, that predicts precisely where we are now, right? This has been going on for a long time. Anyone who has any understanding of higher ed knew that this is a disaster, and an expensive one at that. Shoot, what was the other thing I was going to mention? It'll come to me. Oh, the other thing is that, Brendan and I were chatting recently, talking about the fact that demographic trends are not definitive of our enrollment trends. Certainly not when there are private colleges in this state that are bordering on $100,000 a year to attend. We should be scooping students up. Our costs are low. We should be thriving right now if we are offering quality education. And instead, as you described, we are just turning students away. We are ejecting them at the door, right? So, and on every single level, failing to support them. It's such a failure on our part, not just in our jobs, but like as a service to the state, what it means to live in Connecticut, right? What it means to raise a kid in Connecticut. Gosh. So yeah, sorry, venting. We need it.
Thank you, Kalina. Lois, you had your hand up?
I just want to piggyback on what Kat and Kalina said. Stephen Adair and I have been chronicling this since 2017 in public comments to NIASC and NECHI, and everybody has been ignoring it. And I am not convinced that they will just continue to ignore it with these and try and bury these reports with some reports, kind of like that SVP, Social Ventures Partners, the people they've hired. And oddly enough, Ted Yang, who is on the Board of Regents, founded that company, and his wife is a staff member on that company. So how do you think they're going to report?
Thank you, Lois. Yeah, I was actually going to mention concerns over NetGE as well, that, uh, an accreditor should be able to pick up on these things. Early in a lot of different processes, NetGE was rightly responsive to concerns, but that somehow, for some reason, seemed to dissipate, despite the fact that um, that stakeholders were raising these concerns to them. So I do think there's a lot of different parties who need to own what has happened, and we need to actually get to where we need to be as quickly as possible. Which will not be straightforward. It's easier said than done. So, Andre, you had your hand up.
Yeah, when Netchi was visiting Tunxis, I actually openly told them that they in fact were participating in a fraud, because they were. But that didn't seem to have much of an impact. And the reason is obvious, because if the governor wants something, they're not going to stand against the governor.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Do we have other things people would like to mention before we go to the next item on our agenda? The next item, I believe, and let me make sure I have the order correct here, is
Excuse me, Brendan.
resolutions. Yes.
Sorry, this is Jen Long. I was trying to unmute and I couldn't get it to do it. Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, please do. Please
Thank
do.
you. I just wanted to also state that in response to what Kalina was saying, it's not just, I think, the issue with the testing the students when they're coming in, which is a huge problem, but also the disability services are so problematic for students. And I just wanted to raise that as a concern, because I have many students who say that they need their accommodations, and it's been unbelievable the amount of students who just could not get them in recent times. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an issue.
Thank you, Jen. That's extremely important. So, yeah, we should definitely make sure we continue with these discussions. And as Kalina mentioned, having system office people visit, present information alongside the reports we have. We can continue these conversations and talk about recommendations we might have to move the institutions forward. Andre?
Yeah, I have a real question here, okay? I'm supposed to be advising students, and with this ACME policy, I'm supposed to be signing students up for college level English and math, knowing full well that they will flunk. And I'm sorry, but I have a ethical issue. I mean, can I really do this with to me that's fraud. I mean, I know they're going to fail, and in fact, worse than that, students, these will be the weakest students. These are the ones that we're actually, this is part of our mission to actually help them. We are the last stop for them. And if they flunk, they will never come to college at all. They will be convinced that they can't possibly do it. And that'll be the impact of this. Now, 10 years down the road, somebody's going to figure out that, gee, maybe a whole bunch of students have not been helped, okay, and it's because of this idiotic policy. But I don't think I can advise students, with a good conscience and tell them that. I don't know what the hell to do.
Andre, we met with those, remember we met with a faculty group from California dealing with this. And we know that at CUNY, they are also dealing with this. This is a national trend. And it's again fueled by a circle of what Robin Israels calls the new edu-philanthropists.
Bill Gates.
Pardon?
Bill Gates.
Well,
I
yeah.
know. I've read some of that crap that his people produced. It's junk science.
Yeah, and he's among them, and I think so. This is interesting. Lois has been talking about this book forever. I've read it and also had the opportunity to present on it with the author recently. I think it's And, you know, for a while I thought maybe it was a little too niche, but the issue that you're talking about, Andre, seems to be like just a foundational, almost like a civil rights issue. There are people that we do not educate in the state. There are people who do not get access to education that gets them to the point where they are literate in the state. And then we leave them abandoned before they can get to college. And those people have certain commonalities, whether it's economic, racial, whatever. Um, you know, what she talks about is she connects the dots across the country and talks about how the structure of funding or philanthropy for higher ed has changed. It used to be that you give the money to the college and have them fund their own initiatives. And now it is that these think tanks decide what the measures of success for colleges are, and then fund you to the extent that you meet those, right, those things, or adopt these policies. So we are having policies imposed on us once again, like just like this design of the consolidation, by people who themselves have no experience in community colleges and higher ed in any of these things. They are in short supply in most of these institutions. I say all that to say, like, I your observation, like, I don't think it's an exaggeration, the level of disservice that we are doing to students if we don't provide the kind of developmental education that the state ought to provide. We're setting them up for failure and we're charging them for that experience. It is fraud. It's not an exaggeration. It is that. Because we're not disclosing to them the fact that they cannot succeed under these conditions.
And how does this serve the goal of equity, for crying out loud?
Absolutely, yes. And yet it is packaged in the language of equity and anti-racism to just make it that much more enragingly fraudulent. So when we get to new business, you know, Lois and I have been talking about maybe doing a little reading group on this, and I think it's probably worthwhile because this is spreading. It's not in the past. We've already gone through it, but it's spreading, and I think we're still going to have to address the developmental ed portion of things at the state level. Go ahead, Lois.
Yeah, yes, I've been going on about this book for ages, and I think it should be required reading for everybody in public higher education. It's as simple as that. It's called The Cost of Completion by Robin Isserles, Isserles.
Jen, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, I did. I heard, I'm not sure if this was stated already, but I heard that the developmental English as an example will be gone by 2025 for sure. And I think another thing that's happening is that faculty are starting to look at, you know, I think that what's going to end up happening is the curriculum is going to get easier, and for in some classes and some not, and that the systems across the state are really problematic for lots of reasons. There's so many communication problems. There's so many gaps for students. But at the end of the day, what really happened at the PA 1240 Council at the beginning was when we dropped off the communication with the high schools, so they were graduating people who could not read and write at a basic level. Um, you know, when we decided we would take those students, we had to educate them. And so a lot of this is really coming down to, again, disabilities and accommodations for students who were given services in high school. If they get to college, we're not equipping them with the accommodations they need. These are students with disabilities like ADHD, which is an actual disability. And then we're not meeting them where they need to be met because we no longer have this programming. So there's a lot of really big ethical problems that are happening here. And I think that as soon as the high school stepped away from the table in the PA 1240 Council, you know, because we thought at that time there would still be some level of developmental, that's when part of the big problem happened, because they were going to do their part also of not graduating students who were so woefully underprepared. And then we just stopped that discussion. So I just wanted to throw that out there as some perspective, because I was on that committee for so long. And I raised this point a lot, but they're still taking the money from the students and they're letting them come in, but the students can't possibly pass, even though I do see a thread of faculty lowering their standards out of frustration, out of not knowing what to do when they have such a heterogeneous grouping of underprepared students. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Kat, did you have your hand?
Yes, very quickly. And on the other end, the students who are prepared, who have a high school GPA that places them into English 1010 with a workshop, they are no longer allowed to challenge that placement. So they have to take the English 1010 with 0910, regardless of whether or not that is the course they actually need, which I think is absolutely egregious, forcing a student to take a 6 credit class. We all know the CPAS issues that are happening with no opportunity to challenge. And the reasoning, because I asked specifically about that, is that we don't have the resources to read those challenge essays, so students will have to take the course. But if a student comes in without a high school GPA, they can take the challenge essay and place wherever they end up. So, thanks.
Thank you. I think James was next, although I'm not 100%. But James?
Yeah, it's just it's funny you guys are mentioning the 6 credit for math. Um, I always raising the point where I'm like, guys, you can't really put a student into a 6 level credit class, unless they had the class, prior or something like this, like, or they had, they were trying to, take off those remedial math classes, because clearly when they comes in, they weren't really ready, what I mean, to take the college level class. Now it's funny that now somehow they are going back to the previous model. So they spend all this time making all of these courses, making me work like crazy. And then now, all of a sudden now, we keeping some of those courses in the book, because the plan was for them to remove them by 2025. But it appears that there is like a massive, the way I look at it, well, I don't have the data in my hand, but it seems like every instructor, every meeting that I go to, with especially the CMAC meeting, we talked a lot, and then they kept saying that we are not making any progress, or there is not a high success completion of those prerequisite math courses. So now maybe it's a good idea to have those standalone courses. So now it's like we're going back to what we original were, and then now it's just like all of this time, all of this money is just sort of like wasting. And some of those classes that are 6 credit, some student doesn't even want to take them because it's just too much, in one semester. So it's just like funny, like you saying that we are taking the money and we not really delivering the services like they actually need. And like Carter is saying is that I don't think anybody's going to listen. Even I have a feeling that even if we like going down like the drain, they're still not going to listen. Something that Jennifer Long says, it's really interesting because I'm facing with that same situation, because I have students where I don't really see them passing the class, and it's a lot of them, and I'm really looking at it. So sometimes I have to sort of like bring the curriculum down a little bit to see if I can, get something, but still on an ethical level, I don't really see this is a good thing to do, because what happened when they take the next class? And I know that math is a chain reaction, especially in algebra. Okay. Statistics is one thing, but algebra line, that's a chain reaction. And if you don't prepare fully, you by the time you take the next course, it's crazier. So now how do we come back from this? I really don't know. But yeah, it's just funny that I feel like no matter what we say, and I believe, and I think I met Louis for the first time at Three Rivers, was like 20, yeah, 2020 when she came in, and I think you from Norwalk Community College, right, Louis? Yeah. So and then she was saying this for the first time. It was like a long time ago, and no one. I think she was the first one that said it. That says like taking this right is not good for us. I remember that. I think she was the very first person that bring a delegate, and she spoke that she's like, we take this right is not good at all. and it was like a conference, that a conference, like we had like our like faculty meeting or something like that, and she was the first one that spoke. And that time there was mixed emotion into the room. Some people think she was crazy or not, but hey, here we are 4 years later, Louis, exactly as you predicted it. It's happening like that. But one thing that I don't know what we can do as faculty, I feel like it's time for us to really like come together and, I don't know, bring some resolution or have like a serious meeting with the board. Like I don't know the procedure, but if we keep on like this for 2 more years, I don't think like Colina said, do we want a college or we don't? Because that it's like we're just gonna have buildings, but not really standard curriculum. And then we want people to go to the workforce, but I'm not comfortable having a nurse on me trying to give me like an IV, and I'm wondering, do you really know which vein to put the IV on? Like, I don't want to get into that state of mind. Are we really preparing those students, especially in lowering those licensing? I mean, what are we really doing? So I feel like we really need to come together and find a way to really trying to bring the sense into them, not like in a political matter, but like in a very educational matter, because we can't really keep going on like this, especially with our disability student. They are the one that I feel the most for them, because they are not really getting the support that they really need. Some are really trying, don't get me wrong, but we don't have the adequate resources. So, like, sometime in my school, the library close early. We like understaffed. So, like, in the tutoring center I have there, it's understaffed. So now I have to do like online tutoring at night. Like, I mean, not night, like in the afternoon or something, so I can help my night students. So it's like we're not getting enough resources. Deficit is going crazy. And it's just we are going through a road that I feel like we might not come back if we don't do something. Thank you guys. Sorry for the vetting, but I feel like that's where we're heading.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Andre?
I have a question. Do the private colleges do the same thing with developmental courses as we are? They eliminating them? So like Goodwin College, or are they still offering them?
I used to adjunct at a private college. They don't have those. They don't have those. The private college have different structure. If the student, like, first they go by SAT, they must provide the SAT. So I don't know if all the private colleges do that, but they must provide the SAT score. That is a must. And then if they don't provide the SAT score, they have to take a placement test. And if they score enough on that placement test, they will allow them to go to that course. But if they don't, they're gonna make them do like maybe like a sort of like a boot camp or something like this to prepare them to transition, because some of those colleges does not have those remedial courses.
No, because maybe I can advise students to go there. No, because I'm sorry.
But it's expensive, Andre.
Uh,
Okay, and yeah, Lois, go ahead.
I just want to clarify with Andre, Goodwin College, now university, is not your standard private university. It's a for-profit. So they're going to have a whole different structure to lure students in to give them money.
oh well.
All right, thank you. One thing that's kind of occurred to me, and this is just more of a question, I guess I would ask if a resolution by the FAC emphasizing the fact that community CT state faculty have to be in charge of the curriculum. I mean, that should be a given in any academic institution, but it doesn't sound like it is right now. So I guess I would just kind of put that out there. It's very disturbing to me that that people with the qualifications in particular academic fields may be finding that the shaping of the curriculum has been removed from them, and I don't know if that's actually what is happening, but that's what it sounds like. And that, I don't think that's the right way that a curriculum should be sort of established and managed. So maybe that's something we could do. Yeah, Andre?
Well, there's a bigger problem. This whole procedure for curriculum design. I mean, it's next to impossible to actually work. I mean, it's a mess, and faculty and I really are not running that show either. Okay, there's a big problem that huge, but that's another story. I mean, the process doesn't work really. I mean, it's set up to fail. I mean, it's a monster. But I'm going to try to write something about that and send off to you. You know, try to analyze that and you know, point out its weaknesses and its problems.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Kalita and then Jen?
Yeah, and just for context, this is an issue that consumed the FAC in 2019, 2020. We had off-the-record meetings with members of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee of the board. We had on-the-record meetings. We had joint meetings. We had documents. We had extensive documents. There are, you know, Jen, I believe, is on CSET, the statewide English faculty, the statewide math faculty, CMAC. All weighed in on this, folks from ESL. There's so much research, analyzing the research has been used to justify this stuff. I mean, so much has been done and said. And then we heard that there was going to be a pause. And I thought that that was hopeful, but it seems that we're ending up right back where we were going all along anyway, just a little more slowly. So, you know, just to say, we've been here before. It is well worth coming back again and maybe digging up some of those documents to remind, because now we have a different ASA, et cetera, to really talk about where we're going. But I hope maybe Jen can talk a little bit more about this. The great loss when we disbanded the PA 1240 committee, because that is a group of people who did a lot of work and gave a lot of thought to what this stuff should look like and made recommendations that we've been unable to fund up until now. We've decided to go cheaper on it instead. To my knowledge, PA 1240, the statute has never been rescinded. So we do have a responsibility to it, and I don't believe that we are upholding that responsibility. So what we do about that is an interesting question.
Thank you. I have a lot to say. I'll probably have to think about it and be ready for the next meeting, but I can tell you that I absolutely agree that the loss of the PA 1240 Council was tragic. It was at an actual meeting where someone came in and said, we're disbanding this council. The chair didn't even know it was happening. It was very swift and problematic. And that committee did work. I mean, I won't provide my commentary, but they did a lot of work that was at least going to help us maintain a level of developmental. And it's just incredibly frustrating that we're losing that. But I will tell you, in answer to the question of our faculty being told what to do, I haven't seen that on the English side. They're pretty much letting us teach the way we want to teach. The trouble is that they've dismantled the program. So if you no longer have an entire developmental program, you're stuck with doing a lot less in one level of instruction. And it becomes like a one-room schoolhouse, and it's really problematic. So that's the one issue, but also the lack of funding for tutors, and these well-trained tutors we've had for a really long time are leaving because they don't have contracts, and the disability services and the testing, and students taking online classes and given an app that absolutely doesn't work. And all of these little things that relate to the teaching and learning are never discussed. And I think that's the piece that, you know, we need to keep moving forward with, because we've done so much work with it on the FAC. People don't listen to us. It's incredibly frustrating, but no one's really looking at the nuance of the teaching and the things students really need, and the people working with the students. We just are too top heavy with middle managers. And, you know, it's the same kind of thing we've been saying for a long time, but I don't think it's that faculty being told what to teach or being given a textbook and told to teach from the textbook. I think it's more like the faculty saying, hey, AI is a really big deal. What's the state going to do? And then the state says nothing. So it's things that faculty want to do that there aren't resources for because we have 8 billion middle managers and no one's answering any of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. So yeah, we definitely should continue this conversation as an agenda item for our next meeting, and maybe we can start circulating some of those documents that Kalina was mentioning, pointing out these concerns, including the P 1240. Any material from that might be helpful. But if there aren't additional comments on this item, maybe we can move on to the resolution that we had actually discussed in March, but did not. It was too difficult to kind of schedule a meeting before this one to pass that resolution. So what I did was I took the summary of what the FAC sort of wanted to state in the resolution and just put it, into the format of a resolution. So let me share that with everybody, and then we can talk about whether we want to amend it or pass it or that sort of thing. So the resolution says, whereas the Connecticut State College and universities are public institutions, whereas CSCUs should be accountable to the public for how funds are expended, whereas transparency can build confidence in and credibility for those leading CSCU, whereas the General Assembly established the Board of Regents as an oversight body for management of CSCU. Resolve the Faculty Advisory Committee to the Board of Regents recommends that all contracts worth $1 million or greater require approval by the Board of Regents. Resolve that a comprehensive list of all external contracts, regardless of worth, be presented to the Board of Regents twice yearly. Resolve that all new administrative positions and management pay increases be approved by the Board of Regents. So I do believe this was a accurate summary of what we hope to do with a resolution providing advice to the BOR on transparency and management and financial matters and oversight. Yeah, I want to open the discussion. And what I'll do is I'll stop sharing the screen, but I'll just copy this text into the chat.
Is a motion in order to adopt this?
I think we could definitely entertain a motion.
So moved then.
Seconded.
And seconded by Kalina. Discussion? Yes, Louis?
I'm just curious as to what we hope to gain by this, since the Board of Regents has been nothing but a rubber stamp for everything that has been done.
Maybe some politicians will take notice.
I'm sorry?
Maybe some legislators may take notice.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe they take their job seriously.
Why would they?
We get some sympathy from legislators, especially since they are going out of their way perhaps to, if they do support us, they're going to need some accountability.
But where would there be accountability since the Board of Regents doesn't report to anybody?
This is going to be these are public documents, right? They have to publicly disclose.
Well, they have to publicly disclose them anyway. We're a public institution.
You tried FOIAing stuff here? Takes about 7
I'm
years.
trying to be devil's advocate here. It's not.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Against this, but I'm not trying to understand the premise, what it is we hope we're going to gain out of this, because as I said, the Board of Regents reports to nobody. They've been a rubber stamp for everything. We are a public institution. This is all supposed to be made public anyway, and lots of it hasn't.
But this does propose more transparency, doesn't it?
I'm not sure I agree with that, but okay.
That's how I see it.
And Lois, this could have been an anomaly, but I do feel obligated to point out that the board did not rubber stamp the system office on automatic textbook billing.
The first time in 12, 15 years.
Well, let's keep that momentum,
Exactly.
if there is any. Lois, I don't know. We may see a reversion to the rubber stamp, but all we can do is try. So additional discussion. All right. I don't hear any other discussion. Should we move to a vote then? All in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
I
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, please. Thank you. All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so the resolution passes. I will make sure it's forwarded to the BOR, and they did just, I think, schedule a special meeting for next week. I haven't seen the agenda for that yet, but depending upon how that meeting is structured, I might introduce the resolution there. Lois?
Can you just speak out what the vote was so that when I do the minutes, I know what it was?
Let's see. You're in terms of a number.
Yes.
Okay, so according to WebEx, we have 17 participants, and I guess it was 17 in favor, no
No,
opposed,
not
no
not
abstentions.
everybody can vote.
No, it would be 10 voting.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Sorry, Brendan. So yeah, I meant to ask you guys about this. Thank you for when the word vote in. So the election that went out, what was the result of the members that were supposed to vote and not voting? So for example, me personally, I do not know if I'm a voting member or not, or am I an alternate person. I don't know if you guys have provided the result of that election, or did you guys email out? Because I have not seen anything, or did I miss something?
I'm gonna put it in the chat right now. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, here we go. All right. So you'll see in this, if you click on that link, voting members have an orange block next to them. And then you've got your first and second alternates for those of you who have that. So what do we have? We have Mark Jackson is here as voting from Central. We don't have, do we have Southern? Oh, wait, no, okay. We don't have Southern. We have Brendan from Eastern. Western is an alternate now, but because we don't have Southern, Western counts. So we have Western. We have Charter Oak. We have James. So this is small campuses. John Anderson is the voting. First alternate is Brian, second is John, third is James. So we have small, and then medium, Jen is voting, then Matthew, then Sarah. We have medium, and then large, I'm the faculty voting, and then staff is Kat. So large, and then staff. Who did I miss? I missed Vu. Diane's not here, right? So Vu, we have Swolf. And then I think we've covered everybody because we still don't have a Charter Oak teaching faculty. Is that correct? Oh, no, that's you, Patrice. That's you, Patrice?
That's
Okay, so we
correct.
have one,
That's
okay,
Their teaching rep. We just don't have an alternate.
okay,
for
that's what we
teacher.
don't have.
We may
All right.
not be able to get one.
Okay, so we have all 10 voting categories represented and the vote was unanimous? Okay,
Lois, is that,
All right, it was
Does that
unanimous.
answer?
That's fine. That's fine.
okay. All right, so our next agenda item, is on the, report covering, shared services. Now, we may not want to go into this too much. We've talked about it a little bit already, but I think the plan is to have Lori Lamb actually come and, present and discuss details of that report. My own sort of summary of it would be that shared services is kind of falling short of where it needs to be. And there's a lot of work to do to address that. Um, and I believe it's the case that some of this information was presented at the CT state governance body. Yeah. So I don't know if people want to mention things they took away from that discussion or ask questions, but it's a pretty major report. There's a large number of people employed sort of within shared services. So this is sort of a important question to ask. How is this going to be remedied, and how are these expenditures going to be put to greater effect? So, Colleen, I don't know if you wanted to kick off this discussion or.
I wish I were more prepared. Has everyone gotten the PowerPoint slides for this? Okay. So maybe let me pull up, maybe I'll just pull up one of the slides. I'm actually sending the link now in the chat. So let me just, give me 1 second. But actually, if you want to go ahead, please, and I'll find the slide.
Well, I don't know that we have seen a plan to address the concerns raised in this shared services report. So that would be sort of the first question. How are they going to remedy these gaps in services? It's going to require a lot of work, and I'm not aware of the plan to do that. But it's certainly an important question. I'm hopeful that I don't know which BOR subcommittee would handle this kind of thing. I don't know if it's finance and infrastructure. That meeting, I believe, is coming up on the 15th of May. So maybe that's where we'll hear about efforts to sort of fill in the gaps. But yeah, I mean, the first step in resolving a problem is figuring out that you have one, and it seems like that's where we are now. So yeah, those are the only comments I have on it at this moment. I think we'll have more to share and discuss once Lori Lamb is here to maybe talk about it. So Lois?
I think a couple of the takeaways of the presentation that she gave was, number one, somebody asked a question about finances and did this save money? Did this cost money? What's going on with the finances? And her response back that she was not given any information about what the what HR cost prior to becoming shared services. So she has no idea what the differences are. She just wasn't given this information, and she wasn't able to get it. And the second one was that they then hired Lori Lamb for $195,000 as a part-time interim vice chancellor of human resources and labor relations. And she lives in Arizona, and she said she wasn't going to leave Arizona because she's taking care of her mother there. And they still hired her, and she said that she really told them that she wasn't out looking for this job, didn't really want it. But, you know, why would you turn down $195,000 for a part-time job when you can stay in Arizona where you live? So she did. And those are my two takeaways.
Thank you, Lois. Do appreciate that. Other comments or questions? All
I'd
right,
say
so
she is refreshingly blunt in her analysis, possibly because she isn't interested in keeping this job. And I appreciate that quite a bit. I can also very briefly share just the quick, like, 2 slides that I think sum up just the scope of the failure. And I think, Andre, were you about to say something? And while I do that,
I'm sorry?
were you about to say something? I wasn't sure.
No,
if I
no,
cut
no,
you
no,
off.
I'm sorry. I'm just laughing.
Okay.
Yeah. We could have told them this for free.
you may be muted, Kalina.
Sorry, yes,
Andre,
yeah,
a part-time job?
but I agree, like, this is, we could have told him all of this for free because this has just been our experience.
How much did they pay for this study?
I don't know. Did you hear that part, Louis?
Oh, I don't think she never,
Well, it looks impressive.
was
So it
never
must be a lot of money.
there was no statement about how much they paid for it, and there's not even a date on this for how long this took.
Mhm.
Well, they
All
did
right.
a decent job of identifying the problems.
Yeah, so I think it'll be good to hear from her because maybe she might be a bit explicit about the kinds of things that you're asking, Brendan.
Okay, great. So we'll work on seeing if we can schedule her to attend our next meeting and follow up on this conversation. So I think the last item or second to last item on our agenda is old and new business. So I don't really have anything there, but I don't know if anyone wants to bring something up.
How do we do this, Lois? We keep talking about doing this reading group. Should we just ask who has interest in reading at least a couple select chapters of Cost of Completion? I recently presented on one of the chapters, the new Eduphilanthropists, with Robin Isserles, and I think that's if we are going to just, Isserles, if we're going to pick, if we're going to pick chapters to read, I would recommend starting there, but we might want to read through the book. But for now, maybe just who's interested and we can get together and make a decision.
Yes, sure. I would go for the whole book, but I'd have to go back and look at the chapters. I think I've got highlights and notes on everything.
An exclamation point.
Right, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Who's the author again?
Robin Isserles, Isserles. Kalina put a link in chat to the book. She's a professor at the Community College of Manhattan in New York City, sociology professor.
I'll look forward to seeing that and reading it a bit. It does sound quite interesting. I guess the other thing I could mention is that I think we are on the very close to having an announcement about the new president for Eastern. So I don't have any particular knowledge directly from anyone, but there have been, I guess, some indicators that things are getting closer. So hopefully we'll hear about that soon because I think the handover is supposed to happen in June, which is not that far off. So Lois?
Have any of the candidates actually seen Eastern, or they still think it's in New York State?
I do think the consultant did correct that picture, I think, in the brochure or whatever it was. It's I will mention this again, but I don't know how many people have seen the movie Fight Club, but the first rule of Fight Club is that you don't talk about Fight Club. And so we actually cannot ask any of the committee members if the candidates have seen the campus because they can't talk about it. So I don't know. Um, all right. Other new business or old business. I did want to also mention, David. We can open the floor. Go ahead, David.
Thanks. I hope you understand why I brought up the issue of the resolution passed at the March 21st BOR meeting. In part because I thought it would be something that Brendan was going to comment upon. When he didn't, I thought it was important for me to bring it up as an example of getting something done. And I would suggest to you, for the resolution that you just passed on the external contracts, that maybe some of the things that I've done could be helpful to you. Namely, print it up and make sure that every member of the board at the next meeting has it at the beginning, in advance of the meeting. Contact the chair of the finance committee and explain to him what you're planning to do. I think all of that is helpful. But let me just add the following. I thought I was being helpful and that I had accomplished something by the resolution at that March 21st meeting. And again, I remind you that the board recommends to presidents that they give priority to departments where more than 25% of faculty retire, and that the report to the board be made for January 1st, 2025. What was the reaction? I'll put it as briefly as I can. When I requested, along with the other two signatories of the resolution, to meet with the council of the AUP, we'd met with the board, let's meet with the council of the AUP as well, I received back a positive response along with a 9-page document, untitled, undated, but signed by all of the members of the AUP executive, not with their titles, but I could certainly identify them, which mentions me no fewer than 40 times, with one exception, unfavorably. I'm referred to as Blitz and his cabal. I'm accused of anti-union activity. I'm told that I've been running to the bosses. It's a kind of language which I find derogatory, and if you take all of it together, possibly defamatory. But, my mother used to tell me, and it's not unique to her, sticks and stones will hurt your bones, but names will never harm you. Still, I don't think that name calling is very helpful, and I even intervened one time at a Board of Regents meeting to comment and criticize one of the public speakers who had done precisely that. Further to this, at the April 8th Faculty Senate meeting at CCSU, and I'm bringing this up now for the record so that there is a transcript of this and a recording of it. At the April 8th Faculty Senate meeting, a 1-page document was read by the chapter president, signed by the AUP system president and secretary, which accused me of having encouraged the board to do direct dealing, having encouraged them to break the law, of being in violation of the AUP contract, and more. The next meeting, I read my response. I said I would not be silenced. I will not be intimidated. I had taken advantage of my freedom of speech and my ability to use critical thinking, something we recommend to all of our students. And I thought that I'd been helpful in getting a resolution passed after 4 years of frustrated, simply for the record, comments and criticisms. I am disappointed but not discouraged. And I have prepared a dossier. It's already 60 pages. And here's my concluding remarks on this. I think the elephant in the room here is the question of the retirement. This can be dealt with rationally and realistically, or people can spin worst-case scenario speculations. At the present time, it's a lose-lose-lose situation. Faculty are deprived of what is not an incentive, but actually a bonus. AUP has received nothing in return, and whatever benefits the system office felt that there would be by having us retire on June 1st rather than the typical August 1st retirement, i.e. before the beginning of the next fiscal year, that is also lost in whatever potential benefit that may have accrued to them in terms of their interactions with the OPM. I still hope, and perhaps I'm naive, that something can be done, because there are members here of the FAC who have an influence on those who are making a decision which I consider misguided and misinformed. But there is an alternative, and I've prepared the dossier. I've done what I could. The stress upon me has gone to what Hans Eliot calls distress. He pointed out, if there was no stress in life, we wouldn't do anything. If we live forever, why should we do anything today or tomorrow? We can always put it off. Stress is helpful in getting things done. But the distress that I have felt as a result of this campaign against me for doing something which I consider objectively helpful to the faculty and to the institutions, at least of the 4 universities. I can't talk about the CT State. I'm not all that familiar with all the details of what is actually going on. So there are 2 possibilities here. I hope, even at this late date, that those of you who have some influence over the union in question exercise that influence for a resolution which could be win-win-win. And I even proposed at the council meeting to which I was finally invited, although I must say I was introduced by the secretary who said, the only reason the Blitz should actually be here is to make an apology for his anti-union activities. Me, a 34-year member of the AUP. I'll conclude with this. This matter can be continued with third parties. The documentation on this is sufficient, I think, for that to occur. I certainly would not propose that for May 8th, because that's the time when we complete our teaching. And also, I would not wish to interfere with anything that's happening in terms of the legislative action to support the pay increases for the AUP faculty and other faculty, and also the appropriation committee recommendation for adequate funding for
Yeah, well, do you
2025
want
for
to
the
just
system.
leave some of them here and then I can figure out what to do with them?
Lois, you're.
Are you in a meeting?
So that's where we are. And that's where I am. I thank you for having taken the time to listen to me. You can say what you wish, if you please, and I'll respond. If not, again, I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, David. David did mention a term here, direct dealing, in our meeting. I would just refer everybody to my comments. I think at the last FAC meeting, I presented a PowerPoint slide on the definition of direct dealing. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is federal labor law gives a bargaining unit exclusive the role of exclusivity in bargaining for its members. So direct dealing relates to a situation in which the right of the union to represent members exclusively is infringed upon. Go ahead, Kalina.
I actually, if anybody else is going to respond, I'd like to let them go first. I just kind of wanted to make a comment about what this reflects about our general situation, which maybe pulls it away from what David is specifically talking about. So I just want to, I'll pause. You want to go ahead again, David, then?
Yeah, it's just a response to this question of direct dealing.
Okay.
I read to you the resolution.
Okay.
It is very clearly, it talked about the board, its presidents, and the various departments at the universities. It had no mention whatever of the union. It did not represent the union, nor does the union have exclusive rights to all of the issues which, for example, the FAC itself brings before the board. And I think we have to have some understanding of the distinction between what is part of the union negotiation, which is specifically with respect to the contract and its application through grievance procedure if necessary, and other matters which are the domain of the university senate, or for that matter, the FAC. So I happen to disagree with Brendan. I'm not a lawyer either. So the two of us are reflecting different points of view. That happens. But on the other hand, I think that I clearly expressed, and I hope that I've persuaded you, that what I did was not based on negotiation with anybody, no false representation. I stood up at a public comment period. I explained my status as a faculty member of 34 years standing at CCSU. I made a proposal to the board, which, interestingly enough, they picked up because I distributed in advance and they had it in front of them. I had learned the lessons from what I tried to do at the December 14th meeting and at the previous meetings as well. So I'll stop there.
Okay, I'll say that, I mean, that sort of my understanding too is that what was presented was the suggestion that the board make a recommendation that expressed a sentiment that could influence the way institutions in fact negotiate this issue. What I find striking is that, you know, we've been trying to figure out what on earth this so-called incentive has been doing, right? Why the interest in the incentive? It's a weird way to spend millions of dollars when to give a bonus to people as they leave our institution, right? As you point out, in a way that doesn't actually incentivize, it doesn't sufficiently incentivize people to leave, it seems, but it does in fact take money and throw it at retiring professors as opposed to students, or to mitigate the tuition increase or anything else. It's a strange way to spend money. Your proposal, one of the few things that I, you know, your suspicion that it's simply about shuffling the dollar amounts on our payroll in anticipation of the beginning of the fiscal year. It's just a money shuffle on paper to appease what, maybe OPM, maybe. It just shows us the sad, sad state of our system's ability to advocate for what we actually are supposed to be doing. And I think we've gone, it's legitimate. It seems as if that is perhaps the only way that they have found to appease the powers that be in exchange for some additional funding. I think our unions have moved in an opposite direction. In fact, I know for a fact because we've been involved in this for a while now, and have instead insisted, rather than conceding to OPM, that we should harm ourselves to make some sort of symbolic sacrifice, as we do all of the time, to demonstrate to OPM that they should maybe give us some change that they claim we don't deserve. That we have instead insisted on a much more robust support for the system. And it is my suspicion, and I might be sorely disappointed in a couple of weeks to find out that I'm wrong, but it is my suspicion that we've caught a foothold there, and that sort of really disappointing bet that the system was making is one that we might not have to actually pursue. So that just is what strikes me, David, because we had such a struggle. Why are they so interested in this? Why are they so interested in this? And when you pointed out that date issue, I was, oh my goodness, like, how sad is that, right? It's very sad to me that we are caught in this ridiculous web of disagreements with each other and really hurting each other over this silly game that they are playing. But I think that's very telling, that insight that you had about just the simple date difference.
If I'm,
Do you have something? Yeah, go ahead.
no, if anybody else wants to speak, please, I'll wait.
I only see your hand, David, so why don't you
Oh,
go?
can I say
Oh,
something? Sorry.
yes, please,
I'm
Jen,
I'm
yeah.
having trouble with tapping on my phone screen for some reason. I don't have much to weigh in on. I just wanted to say that, David, I think that you're a person of such great character and integrity, and I'm so proud of you, and I think the world of you. And I'm sorry that you had to put up with everything that you've had to put up with in terms of people putting you down. So I must be incredibly frustrating. But working with you and Kalina and Lois these past few years has been one of the highlights of my really long career, frankly, by now. And I think you guys are great. And I hope that you're going to continue on the FAC because your voice matters to me and I appreciate you. And I just love this committee. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that people who try to speak out on whatever the topic is in this system get cut off because they're such strong critical thinkers. And it seems like we've lost our way for the people in charge to get the fact that that's the point. So thank you for your leadership, and Kalina and Lois, you guys are awesome. Thank you.
I second that emotion.
Hi, David.
Well, I probably should stop at that point. But I just want to just mention one thing. The money which was being used for this was not money which would have been available for the operating expenses of any of the institutions. It was leftover ARPA money which had been segregated for some specific, for purposes not related to recurring expenses, such as faculty salaries or institutional expenses. That said, and was going to be swept by the governor and will be swept by the governor because that's what he's proposed, that all of those unexpended ARPA funds be reconsolidated. Secondly, I just want to mention that the refilling of lines is not a matter for union negotiation. I've been a chair of my department on a number of occasions. I've been a director of the honors program. I've been the coordinator for peace studies. Right? And when it comes as department chair, I had people retire with barely a month's notice. I've had two people go on sabbatical at the same time. I have somebody called in sick. I've had people tell me that they can't do a course 1 week before the course is going to happen, and it's a required course, and there's 25 students, right? And you step in and you figure out how to do this. One of the most disappointing parts of this whole conundrum, I would call it a crisis at this point, was the notion that somehow faculty in retiring were doing a disservice to those faculty who remained, that we were, in a sense, degrading the conditions, making the faculty who do not retire do more work. And I found that particularly distasteful, right, as a comment. And that's probably what motivated me most to intervene in the way that I have. Faculty have the absolute right to retire when they see fit. In my case, for example, I came to CCSU a little bit later in life than most. I was 40. I've now I will be completing my 35th year. You can figure out my age at that point. Right? If I want to retire, I don't want to be blamed for making somebody else's job more difficult. That is not a collegial way of doing it. It is not a cooperative way of doing it, and it's not a friendly way of doing it. So that's really what motivated me. The question of the money, if it were a question of other faculty getting this, what we now agree is a bonus, on the condition that I not get it, I would be happy to sign on the dotted line. It never motivated me one way or the other. But there are principles involved in this, and I hope I've drawn them to everybody's attention, and that was my purpose, not to condemn anyone. In fact, let me say the following in conclusion. We have our principles, and one of our principles is to protect and promote public higher education in the state of Connecticut. I think that's something that we all share. And let me add, by all, I mean, even the 4 individuals who wrote the 9-page document denouncing me 39 out of 40 times. That includes the chancellor and members of the executive, the outgoing provost with whom we had, I think, successful and fruitful dealings. But principle is not enough. We need policies. Those policies cannot be implemented without a strategy, and that involves dealing with people. And it means having respect for people, even when they disagree with you, even when they dispute with you. And moreover, let me add, and Kalina knows that I like to use the same beginning letter. So we're into P's: principles, policies, people. One more thing, it's power. And I've learned myself, in those few instances where I've had some power to exercise as a department chair, as a program, or as director, as a coordinator director of a program, that there's both scope and limits. And that we have to be very careful that when we use power, we do not abuse it. I've always adopted the slogan, speak truth to power, which goes back to Bayard Rustin and the Quakers. I've also adopted the slogan, seek truth from facts, which apparently is actually a statement going back to Deng Xiaoping in the period of Reconstruction after the crisis and mess of the Cultural Revolution in China. I hope that I've sort of made myself clear and done what I can to assist the Faculty Advisory Committee, and what I've done using whatever experience I had of 4 years sitting on ex officio at the board and being pretty well frustrated of not getting anything done except for statements for the record. Well, finally, I got something done. And Brendan, you noticed the change that happened at that March 21st meeting. That was the result of a lot of years of effort. Kalina mentioned it, of working with people, of understanding how to interact with power and how to use our own power. I'll conclude with that.
All right, thank you, David. Any other comments at this point? Could entertain a motion to adjourn. I don't know if Andre is still out there. He's usually a reliable.
I'm seconding
All right. All right. Well, I hope everybody has a good weekend, and yeah, we will follow up with details for our next meeting. Thank you.
Take care.
I'm going to stop the recording.